Hi peeps, welcome back to my channel. So, the Indigo Court series started as a dream. And I sold the premise of it on the basis of one paragraph about that dream. Otherworld started with a sudden vision while I was watching TV. Whisper Hollow started as a demented little dream. Wild Hunt, I plotted out something entirely different. I had intended something entirely different. And when I started writing, that wasn't what showed up. Almost every series I've had that I've written has begun in this fashion. And that's how I write. So today I'm going to talk about what happens when you're an organic writer. Some people use the term pantser. How do you go about making it work when all the traditional advice on plot this out, form your character sheets and stuff, it just doesn't work for you? So I'm going to talk to you about that today. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, please do so now. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up or a paws up if you are a cat. And yeah, hit the bell to get notified when I have new videos out. And we'll get started here in just a moment. So as I said in the intro, I'm an organic writer. I do not like the term pantser. I don't wear pants and it just seems odd to me. So I use the term organic writer. And I used to feel very alone in the way I worked, because a lot of my friends, probably 70% of the writers I've talked to, sit there and laboriously plot out their work. They may write like 10,000 word outlines. You know, they fill out character sheets before they've even written about the character. And in my mind, I'm sitting here going, I don't do that. How does that work? Am I doing something weird? I mean, I have made a great success of my work, and I'm very happy with my process, and it works for me. But sometimes I felt a little left out of the loop. So I'm doing this video today for the aspiring writers out there, or the already entrenched writers, who are feeling left out and maybe like they're doing something wrong. So yeah, we're going to talk about all that today. So when I first was writing the Indigo Court series, well, long before I wrote it, I had a dream. And I dreamt that I was in a museum and I was looking at all these paintings, and I came to one wall-sized mural. And it was a painting mostly in whites, golds, browns, very neutral winter colors, of a woman walking through a forest. And there were odd, sort of grotesquely formed creatures hiding under the different bushes and behind trees. And the woman, I could tell she was very frightened, and I knew she was looking for somebody. I don't know how I knew that, but I knew she was looking for what I thought was her aunt, who had vanished. And over the entire scene, at the top of the painting, was a spidery, wispy queen. And she was like arched over the entire scene. And when I woke up, that dream stayed with me. I wrote it down because it was so vivid. It was all the dream was me looking at this painting. And as time went on, the dream began to wear on me. I mean, it began to nag me more and more. And so I sat down and I wrote out a couple paragraphs about what I thought the dream was about, which was this woman who had lost her aunt to a very deadly version of the Fae. And she was out looking for her aunt in the forest. And everything was wintry, and the queen was like a queen of winter, a snow queen type. And I sent that to my editor, my agent at the time, and they were intrigued. And this was when I was partway through the sister series, the Otherworld series. And they gave me 3 books on it, a contract for 3 books. And that's how the Indigo Court series started. There was no sitting down and plotting it out. There was no figuring out exactly what it was going to be. I didn't even know it was going to be about the vampiric fae until I started writing and they showed up. And so I liken writing that series to following the trail of breadcrumbs through the forest. I'm Hansel and Gretel. I'm wandering through the forest looking for a crumb here or there to lead me out to the other side. That's how I wrote that entire series. It was like writing in a dream, because I had no clue how it really was going to end until I got there. Otherworld. I was sitting watching TV one night. We had these windows that were like 7.5 feet up off the floor. They started at about 7.5 feet and went up to about 10 feet. And I was sitting watching TV, and one night, all of a sudden, it's like in my mind's eye, these 3 women jumped out through the window into the living room in front of me, and they introduced themselves as Camille, Delilah, and Menelly. And I looked at them, and they looked like they showed up in the series, and they told me, you know, we're half fae, half human, and you need to write our story. And so, again, it's like I sat down and I wrote about a page, maybe 2 paragraphs, of what I thought it was going to be like, and sent that to my agent and editor. And at the time, urban fantasy was huge, so they figured it was going to be some form of urban fantasy. And my editor came back to me and she said, well, I've shown this to 8 different editors. We have no clue what this is, but we're intrigued enough that we're going to give you a 3-book contract, and we'll figure out how to market it when we see the first book. And that's how Otherworld started. I had not planned to write round robin through the sisters. So when I wrote Camille's the very first book, Witchling, and turned it in, my editor was like, she loved it, and you know, she said they thought it was going to go over very well. And she said, so now it's time for Delilah's book. And I'm like, say what? And she said, well, that's what we thought you were pitching, is that you would write each book in one of the sisters' points of view. And I was like, that's not what I had intended. And I told her, I don't know if I can do that, because it seemed very odd to me. She said, I trust you. I think you can. Well, I started writing Changeling, Delilah's book, and I had to throw away the first 200 pages because I realized I was writing Delilah as Camille saw her. So I threw away the first 200 pages, and I tried to coax Delilah out, and oh, she was hard. She was hard to write. But eventually, I wrote Changeling and realized that was her voice. And it was much easier by the time I came to Darkling to write Menelly, and then things, you know, continued to spiral out from there. But that is how Otherworld started. In terms of Whisper Hollow, I started dreaming of the characters before I ever wrote them. And they would come and haunt my dreams, especially Diago and Dr. Divine and Karis to some degree, which is odd because she was the main character. But Dr. Divine and Diago and Pagan showed up a lot. And I realized that I needed to write this out on the peninsula, in terms of set it out on the peninsula, because that area was calling to me. And I've been over there several times. It is very much like you feel in the books. So I sat down and sort of jotted out a couple pages of what I thought the series was going to be like. Sent it to my editor. They bought 2 books, and so that's how that started. The Wild Hunt. I was going to set the Wild Hunt, and this is totally different than what it turned out to be. I was going to make a paranormal dating service with the main character being the matchmaker, and have it round robin through different couples. When I started to write it, that did not want to come through at all. In fact, it was just gone. And I was like, okay, so what am I going to write? And then all of a sudden, Ember showed up, and Hearn, and everything just flew in after that. And it was like, oh, okay, it's more urban fantasy. It's not paranormal romance as much. And we're dealing with the Celtic gods at this point. And so that's how the Wild Hunt started. And I have dreamed about the Wild Hunt. I've dreamed about 3 of my series. Indigo Court, I've had several dreams. Crawl came to me in a dream. And that's how his character in the Indigo Court series got started. Lannon came to me. In fact, I dreamt a lot about vampires when I was writing that series. Whisper Hollow, the characters have come to me in dreams, especially the creepy ones in the forest and in the town. And Dr. Divine is a character who I really someday want to write a story for him alone, because he totally fascinates me. Wild Hunt, I've been dreaming about. Raven shows up a lot. And it's hard to say whether I enjoy writing Raven or Ember better. Raven's books are almost more personal, where Ember's books are a bigger picture. And they complement each other, and I love both main characters. So that's a little about how I have begun the process of writing some of my series. Now, a lot of writers are going to tell you that you must plot, that you must figure out everything in ahead of time, that it's really good to have this entire list of stuff you want to happen, and you need to figure out your characters ahead of time. And I'm here to tell you that doesn't ring true for every writer. There are a subset of writers, and I am one of them, who must process the work organically as we write, as we move along through the books. Now, there is actually a reason for this for a number of us. I took Becca Syme's class, Write Better Faster, and it's not a class on how to write fast. It's a class on how to learn to use your strengths to help streamline your work. And it's helped me immensely. I will put a link to her class below. I'm not an affiliate. I do, go to her for life/writing coaching because she's helped me a great deal. But I'm not an affiliate, so I don't make any money off of it. But I really love her work, love her class, and I found it incredibly helpful. One thing I learned while I was taking that class is that one of my top 5 strengths, according to the Clifton Strengths Finder, is called intellection. And the way she described this to me is basically it means that my mind works sort of like a computer where it processes in the background. And when the answer is there, it just sort of like shoots it into my conscious mind. So my subconscious does a lot of the work for me. By the time these characters and stories come to me, I have already processed through creating them. I just don't know what they are yet, and it takes actually putting fingers to keyboard for me to understand when it starts emerging, because it comes out of my subconscious. If you are a writer who writes organically, who writes on a seat of your pants level, where the story must evolve through the writing, you're not going to benefit from massive outlining. Now, I do a little bit of outlining. One thing I do is when I'm about 4 chapters into the story, when I've got a good anchor there, I will start writing a few highlights I know need to happen for the next few chapters. And I just make a bullet list. You know, this needs to happen. Ember needs to go over to that shop. Ember needs to talk to somebody. And I just work my way through those. But it's only for a few chapters at a time. I also keep a reverse outline. When I finish writing a chapter, I note down the highlights in a bullet list again that happened in that chapter. Say I get a few chapters ahead and I realize that I needed more foreshadowing for a certain event, I can go back on my reverse outline and jot down in chapter 3 I need foreshadowing for the fight in chapter 7. And that way when I go back and revise, I can add that in as I go. Those things help me a lot. I work off of about a page, if that, synopsis for each book. That's, you know, it's the big picture, it's the highlights, it's the blurb, basically, with a little bit extra in there. Do I know how it's going to end? Generally, yes, in a very big picture way. Do I know what's going to happen during it? Some things, but not everything, and not everything important. Hi, Kaylee. Kaylee says hello. So, I guess what I'm saying is don't feel like you're not a real writer. Don't feel like an imposter if this is the way you work. Not everybody is going to sit there and outline, 22 chapters of a book. No, don't do that. And have it work for them. You need to find the process that works best for you. Now, I've had people ask me, well, how do you make your character so well-rounded? Well, for one thing, it's important to remember that you are more than cardboard. And these characters need to be real to you. If you find yourself writing a stereotype, chances are you are relying on a cardboard cutout of a character. What are your characters' hopes and dreams? What are your characters' passions? That will come through the writing. That will come as you write if you are a writer who works on a subconscious level. If you are an organic writer, you will learn that as you go along. And it's important, once you do learn things about your character, if you need to add things back in during the beginning of the book to establish a few of those traits, it's fine to do that. I am a writer who I write through. I write tight. I generally have to add a bit more than I have to take away. There are very few deleted scenes in my books. If anything, I add stuff in. Somebody's very needy today. And I suppose what I want to tell you is that it's okay not to know everything about the character. It's okay not to try and force them. Because as you write, if you are working on a subconscious level, the character will become more well-rounded. Now, one of the tricks that I use, if I need to know something about them, and I haven't found that out yet, is I will go into a period of meditation where I will visualize myself in my office, or a office. Don't whack the microphone with your tail. And I will invite them in. I will call them into my office. And I will visualize them walking into my office, and that's how I see what they look like. I don't decide what hair color they've got. I don't decide how tall they are, how thin, how short, how fat, how, what scars they have. Those come through the writing. That comes to me through the writing. So I I am not one to tell a person, well, sit down and figure out what you want them to look like. It's like, for me, the characters look like they look. And when I call them into a meeting, I will sometimes look them over and see what style of clothes they're wearing, see whether they've got any visible scars, look at their hair color. And I will have them sit down and I will ask them questions. And I will listen after I ask a question. And they'll talk to me. They'll tell me what I want to know generally, unless they're really big on keeping a few things secret. From Otherworld, Smokey, Yampatar, never told me his real name. Ever. Dragons tend not to tell you their real names. And he never did. I still don't know it to this day. And I can't assign him one because it's probably not going to be his name since he didn't tell me. Oh, what else? This is kind of a roundabout discussion because honestly, to writers who plot as a matter of course and who feel uncomfortable without going in without an outline, this sounds all woo-woo and crazy. But if you are this kind of a writer, you will understand what I'm saying. And one type is not better than the other in either way. I mean, it's like, it's all a personal process. And you have to find the process that works for you. If you are not an outliner, outlining is going to be kind of torture. I had to outline all the mysteries I wrote for Berkeley. And it was so hard because I couldn't, it was like I was sitting there going, how do I know what's going to happen until it happens? And it doesn't happen until I write it. That's my mindset. If I haven't written it down, it hasn't happened yet in their world. So how do I know what's going to happen? I'll know when I find out. I'll know when I get there. I kind of get the reader's satisfaction about finding out what's going on for the most part, except for big picture things. That readers do when I'm writing. It's like, oh, wow, that's cool. I didn't know that was going to happen. Now what's going to happen? Now what does that mean for the future? So even when I'm writing that small checklist of highlights coming up, those are subject to change depending on what happens as I write the next chapter. I can't give you a formula for figuring it out. All I can do is validate the way you write. All I can do is validate that this is a successful way of writing. I mean, obviously, I made it to the big lists writing this way. I sell to a wide audience writing this way. People love my books. Well, some people love my books, and I'm very grateful they do. So, yeah, you can be successful and not sit there and outline every single book. You have to be consistent, which is why I keep my series Bible, and I'm linking to that below, because that helps keep me out of trouble, for the most part. Yeah, I'm just trying to validate intuitive writing. That's what I would call it, is intuitive writing. And it is a perfectly legitimate way of writing a book and of having it work. And if it's the way you work, don't let anybody tell you to try it a different way. I mean, you can try it, but don't be surprised if you get muddled down and need to come back to what worked for you in the first place. It's just as valid as anybody who outlines their books and as anybody who sits there and prepares character sheets before they ever put the pen to the page. I think that's going to be it for now. As I said, this is just a validation video, and I hope it helps. If you have some questions, leave them for me in the comments below. I'll either answer there or in another video. I hope that you find your process and that it works for you and that you enjoy your process, because really enjoying the writing is the biggest thing about it. If we didn't love to write, it would be a torturous career, and I can tell you that from personal experience. I love to write. If I didn't love to write, I sure as hell wouldn't be doing this for a living. So I will talk to you later. Take care. Bye-bye.